Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Live from New York, Jacksonville, Florida, and Washington, D.C. You're in the war room. It's Thursday, the 25th of September, year of our Lord 2020. President Trump getting the language right. It's the continuation project, the continuity project. This is about continuity. Continuity of our government, continuity of our American republic, continuity of law and order, and continuity of Donald J. Trump's presidency. All this nonsense, and that reporter asking a peaceful transfer of power, people rioting in the streets. Yeah, people rioting in the streets because of the anarchy brought by the Democratic Party, the progressive left, and the globalists, okay? They brought this on themselves. They brought this on this country. You're watching the platinum standard for shows about the pandemic, war and pandemic. We started the show back in mid-January, months before the World Health Organization called it a pandemic, months before the mainstream media got on this story. We told you this was a world historical event, and we have covered this in its full spectrum, right? We've had many people on here, and some of the people in the war room, you know, don't think this is that big a deal. Other people think it's a biological weapon from the Chinese Communist Party, but we've covered every aspect of it, but we take it seriously. The mainstream media, the progressive left, people like Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon every night, the hysteria, the mass hysteria. They're not science-based, they're not evidence-based, they're not data-based. It's hysteria. And they have traumatized their followers. They have traumatized their voters, particularly the low-information voters. They've traumatized them, and now they don't want to come out, and they don't want to come out to vote. So in doing that, they're prepared to tear down. They're prepared to reverse the will of the American people on the 3rd of November, the year of our Lord 2020, in 39 days, 39 and a wake up. They're prepared to reverse it. They're prepared to do anything possible to reverse an American election. And ladies and gentlemen, let me be brutally frank. We will never allow that to happen, okay? The illegitimate, unelected junta that has sleepy Joe Biden, who they just put a lid on his campaign here at 9:30 a.m. this morning. That means no other activity.
Excuse me.
Basically, Joe Biden, you know, feeds him, does the Gerbers, has the bib on, you know, cleans his diaper, powders his bottom. Joe's fresh for the day, but then they put a lid on him. Okay.
920.
John Fredericks Radio Network, Real America's Voice, now channel Dish 219, Comcast Chicago, channel 113. Expanding throughout the nation, the platform of the Trump Revolution. And of course, Chris Ruddy and the team, Newsmax TV. We've got G News, G Media, blasting through the firewall into China. I want to appreciate that, the reason the show's so big. Want to go to, we've got Jack Posobiec. He's live down in Jacksonville, Florida. Jack will be covering for One America. Another great, boy, you got Real America's Voice, you got Newsmax, you got One America, the three horsemen, right, that are pulling through the Trump program here day in and day out. Jack's live down in Jacksonville. We're going to bring Jack in a minute. Got Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey in the war room. I want to thank the Metropolitan Republican Club of New York. Had another amazing event last night. Raheem Kassam was lit. He must have gotten into my Red Bulls. Absolutely amazing start. I want to thank Ian Walsh. I'll get that, my spelling's it. Ian Walsh Riley, the president, Krisha Lenzo for the club last night. Just unbelievable time. Great people, the cutting edge of the young Republican movement in this country, real fire breathers. So, Jack, I want to go to you. You've been, you're naval intelligence. You speak perfect Mandarin. You're one of the smartest guys in the country. You've been ahead of this anarchy, all of this. Although Chris Ray says Antifa is not really a movement, it's not an organization. It's really just a thought, right? It's just some ideas. It's an ideology. You've been from Portland all over. You're covering the rally today. Give us your thoughts on what happened yesterday in Louisville. Where do we stand on this? And particularly the media now in full meltdown on the on what they call the transition. They ought to start referring to it what it's going to be: the continuity project, the continuation of Trump 45. What say you, Jack Posobiec?
Yes, Steve, I saw some really interesting language coming out of the media yesterday in regards to what you're talking about right now, the transition of power, the transfer of power, the continuity of power, as well as the way the media reacting to Louisville and the anarchy that broke out there. First and foremost, we saw the U-Haul trucks, the videos that were coming out immediately after this announcement was made that officers would not be charged for the death. The grand jury had ruled the death of Breonna Taylor to be essentially accidental, that officers would not be charged with murder. We saw U-Haul trucks pull up that were pre-parked outside of the courthouse, black-clad militants, anarchists, rushing up to it, opening the back, and pulling out riot materials, riot gear, signs, banners, with Antifa flags, the three-arrow logo of Antifa, formerly the Iron Front, that's now used across the country. They're marching through residential neighborhoods of Louisville, along with Linda Sarsour, by the way, yesterday. And yet the head of the FBI is telling us that it's just an idea, it's just a something on social media, it's not something to worry about. And then you've got people like Chris Hayes over on MSNBC talking about Antifa and these anarchists and these rioters as pro-democracy forces. Go look at his Twitter account. I mean, it reads like something out of Eastern Europe that he's talking about. He's saying he's talking about pro-democracy forces versus pro-regime forces in the streets. This is not the way that we talk in the United States of America in the run-up to election. We're about 1 month away from the election. That kind of rhetoric is irresponsible, number one. But even more so to the irresponsible rhetoric, you've got the problem of an FBI that doesn't seem to be taking the threat seriously, that doesn't seem to be doing the investigations of this domestic terror organization, this group, this network, right? Call it whatever word you want. These are actual people who are working together to commit these acts against the American people, and it is the duty of the FBI and our national security apparatus to support state and local governments to be able to provide safety and security, law and order for the American people. This is the basic social contract. The basic social contract between government and the citizens. That is where Chris Ray specifically, because it does fall on him at the end of the day, he is failing in his duty.
Okay, hashtag war and pandemic in the live stream. We need to hear your comments. We need to hear your thoughts. You're the most powerful audience in the world. You've done more to change history in the last 9-10 months than anybody. It's been remarkable. Raheem, I know you're a guy that really focuses on information warfare and what they're doing. Talk to us about, I want to get back to Chris Ray and the Justice Department and the epic failures there to actually take any action on an international terrorist group like Antifa. But Raheem, go back to this transfer of power, this peaceful transfer of power. The media's already called it, right? They're already calling, hey, you got to have a transition. Note to self, note to the media, Donald J. Trump's going to win big on 3 November. We've outed your transition integrity project. This is the continuity project. There's going to be a seamless continuity between the first term of President Trump and the second term of President Trump, right? It may be a little bumpier than what's going to happen in the third term of President Trump, but I digress. That's a topic for another day. Raheem, what say you about all this in the briefing room, et cetera, the Vanity Fair, the Atlantic, New York Magazine, the peaceful transfer of power?
Well, I think you only need to look at the television news coverage this morning to see that this wasn't just some unhinged moment from a reporter that got, misreported the headlines, not actually reading what the president even said in the briefing room last night, but in fact what they wanted him to say, which was basically, I'm not leaving. And you look at all of that, and you can see that this is scripted at this point. I mean, there's a reason that the Joe Biden campaign thinks and does call a lid on the campaign at 9:20 in the morning, because they're not campaigning today. The media's campaigning for them today. That was the setup yesterday. That was the setup when President Trump was at the podium. It was the setup to be leading the news cycle this morning, and it will carry the news cycle over the course of the day. You'll see the same talking heads over the course of the day. This is how it's done, rolling around all day long on MSNBC and CNN and even Fox News and beyond, to say, yeah, the president needs to be unequivocally clear that he will leave office if he loses on November the 3rd. Has anybody asked Joe Biden? Oh, wait, they can't, because he's nowhere to be asked that question. And I want to also say thank you, Steve, last night for the great speech you gave at the Metropolitan Club for New York, and the people that organized that. I do have one correction to make, though. I didn't find your Red Bull stash. I just got my guy Danny over at Morton's. He made me some fantastic martinis for lunch, so I was just cruising that yesterday evening.
Jack Maxey, give us your thoughts on this, on the peaceful transfer of power. He's not leaving. I want to tell the mainstream media, he's not leaving for one basic fact. On the real vote that happens on November 3rd, the will of the American people is that he stays in place. What say you, Jack Maxey?
As always, when you're looking at the Democrats, listen, this is projection, right? We've had riots in the streets now for 3 or 4 months. They're going to riot all the way up through November 3rd and all the way through the inauguration. And they asked the question of the president, is he going to support a peaceful transition of power? Number one, they are not peaceful. And number two, the question presumes that Donald Trump is not going to win this election. I believe Donald Trump will win this election, and I believe that it is the Democrats who will not agree to any sort of transition, and they are rioting right now. I don't see why we should trust a single word that comes out of their mouths. This is projection and nothing more.
The people should know, and I want to hear from #WarRoomPandemic, the live stream. You've got other places we ought to be talking, other places we're booking now 5 a day. If I can do it, I did Poland yesterday. Jack Posobiec will be glad to know that. I did Germany this morning, right at the crack of dawn. The Germans brought up a good point, Raheem, on some of your reporting at the National Pulse. They're reading you very closely. I think it was in the Transition Integrity Project. They actually had a quote from either an article or somebody saying, the concept of election night is dangerous. The concept of election night is dangerous. These things can't be called. You know what they're doing? They're raising the rhetoric, right? They're raising the rhetoric that we're evil, that this is dangerous, that Trump is a tyrant, a tin pot tyrant. I think Bloomberg had today as the headline. They're rioting in the streets. They're showing the anarchy. They're killing police officers. They're shooting police officers, and all the time it's Donald Trump's the problem. Jack, let me pitch back to you so you can take us out. This is War Room Pandemic. War Room Pandemic. I heard you got to say in the live stream. Tell us what you think. We got Jack Posobiec as our co-host this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, Steve, we really need.
Go ahead, Jack.
Sorry, what did you Jack you met there?
Well, somebody needs to take us out, so I'm going to do it. All right, we return War Room Pandemic in the next segment. We've got so much to go through, so many clips to play, you guys. Make sure you're staying tuned. Hit the like buttons, hit the share buttons. We need as many eyeballs on this as possible. The more eyeballs, the more action, and that's what we're all about here. Stay tuned. Jack Maxey, Jack Posobiec, Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam return with more War Room Pandemic in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
It's really embarrassing. And if you're a Republican running in the Senate, you have to be horrified, or a House member running in a close race. You just have to be horrified by the fact that you have a president at the top of your ticket who is admitting to Americans that he knows he's a loser. Donald Trump knows already that he's a loser because he's talking like a loser. He's talking like a loser who knows that he doesn't have a chance to win.
Joe Scarborough talking about losers. That would be Mika's husband. Enough said. Welcome back to War and Pandemic, the granddaddy of them all. Remember, if you watch or listen to the podcast now got 15 million downloads, and we're ubiquitous everywhere on our distribution platforms, folks. You know that there's no reason to panic. The reason we did this show is to make sure people didn't panic. That there is not mass hysteria. You know, this plague sent by the Chinese Communist Party is horrific. Right? It's ripped through the world economy. It's left 1 million people dead. It's absolutely horrific, but it can be managed, right? By brains, intelligence, grit. No need to have mass hysteria. That's not what the progressive left wants. They want people as sheep. They support the slave labor model of China. They support the rest of the working class being nothing but serfs. Right? For all their happy talk, they never come up with solutions. And for all the Bernie bros that listen, Bernie's going to be out talking about this threat to American democracy. Just compare and contrast what you hear on this show to the mindless, really kind of happy talk of Bernie Sanders now. I think Bernie's kind of devolved into a irrelevant figure. Right? They're not even listening to him over the Biden campaign. You guys are getting dialed out of anything. Not in the room, not in the deal. So if you're a populist economic nationalist, it's not going to happen. I want to go back. Guys, what's so important about this is you're seeing the elements, the lawfare element for the mass illegal vote by the pound ballots, the in-the-street riots, and also the media hectoring. Look at the hectoring. People are rioting in the transition of power. In the Brady room, they're hectoring the president already about transfer of power, assuming he's lost, right? And then hectoring. Well, people are rioting. This is what they're going to be saying starting on November 3rd. Hey, there's, a siege by Antifa of Washington, D.C., they're rioting, right? Don't we have to, calm down the babies? Don't we have to do something? Why don't you leave? We know you won, but, hey, that's just the will of the American people. We've got Jack Posobiec in Jacksonville, Florida. We've got Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. I want to go to Jack Posobiec. Posobiec, they're coming all in on this. You see Morning Joe, it's going to be relentless. Every day the propaganda machine is going to try to browbeat the president in really walking away from the continuity from his first term to his second term on the victory he's going to win on the real vote, the secret ballot that's going to take place on the 3rd of November this year. What say you, sir?
Hey, what you're seeing them do is an old marketing trick. You see used car salesmen do this called talking past the sale. And in talking past the sale, they're asking, it's like when a car salesman says, hey, picture your family driving in this car down a road on a summer day, or in this convertible. Right? When they're talking about transfer of power, that means they've already assumed that Trump is going to lose. They're actually giving away their playbook right there. They're saying, well, we're going to announce that Trump lost, and then social media is going to crack down on anybody who says that there's a problem with that, or anyone who said Trump won. Mark Zuckerberg has already said in his many words that if Trump declares victory, they're either going to take that down or they're going to deboost it, they're going to shadow ban it, fact check it out of, into oblivion, as well as any social media user who declares that this was an election that was filled with irregularities. They're talking about, will there be violence? Will there be peace? There's already violence in the streets. There already isn't peace on the streets of America. And specifically, think about this. Why is there violence? Why was there violence last night? It was because of a legal decision that they decided to not accept. So I would even go one further. We're talking about the Supreme Court right now. Should this go to the Supreme Court in a Bush v. Gore scenario like 2000, and they get a vote that they don't like, you are still going, or ruling that they don't like, you're still going to see this type of anarchy, this type of mobilization. That's what it is. It is a mobilization. There's a vanguard here. There's a network here that is mobilizing. They are going to be out in the streets regardless of what that court's decision is, because we saw the grand jury decision in Louisville. It wasn't accepted by these people. It wasn't treated as fair by these people. They came out anyway, even though they followed the legal process. They shot 2 police officers. We have to make sure that we talk about that. And they went after the police officers, again, not because of the individuals not caring about their families, but because they saw them as organs of the state, as organs of this legitimate state apparatus that Antifa and anarchist groups view as illegitimate. So the delegitimization of the state is actually part and parcel to their program, to their operations. What they want is legitimacy of mob rule. They want that demos. They want that mob rule, mob justice. They don't care anymore as long as they get their way.
Raheem, have they turned and using mainstream media now and social media information warfare against the American people, against the not just the deplorables, but the broader scope of the American people? Is this information warfare?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been information warfare for a very long time now. I think one of the most curious things about all of this is the extent to which the people in the media have been willing to go along with it. The cover-ups of things that are just manifestly open for everybody to see on social media, such as the U-Haul truck pulling up, that isn't, an unloading in weapons and shields and riot gear, but that isn't covered on the television news. And so what's going on here is now a disconnect. It's a major disconnect. It's a bigger disconnect than we've ever seen between the public and the media. And I'll tell you why that's a really interesting thing is I was just looking at a tweet as you called on me. And the tweet was some silly thing talking about, Jerry Nadler pooping his pants or something yesterday. It's just poking fun at him, basically. And the tweet said, I'm asserting this that happened yesterday. Fact check me. And I thought, that's really interesting. Because the person who tweeted it knows that a fact check from the media is basically just as likely to elicit a level of distrust from the people reading that fact check as it is elicit a trust in what they claim in the fact check. And I think, Jack Posobiec, you've said this as well over the last day or so. I've noticed you talking about the fact checkers, right? There is something here that the fact-checking mantra, the fact-checking narrative, the methodology behind these fact checkers are actually backfiring on them.
Well, Posobiec, let's go into that, because this is the thing about social media. One of the things that, Facebook came out today and said, hey, and I keep telling you, they land a legal predicate to try to get themselves off of liability. They came out with another thing today saying they're not going to put up any ads that declare a winner starting on November 3rd. We told you about this weeks ago. They're going to completely strip down the ability of the Trump movement to basically declare the righteous victory, the legal victory on November 3rd. So what do you talk about, where he's been saying who watches the watchmen, who checks the fact checkers? What's the problem we have here in this information warfare?
So here, I'll give you a perfect example, something that's pretty salient to today's conversation, and that's there was this narrative that in the Breonna Taylor case, which it happened all the way back in March, there's been this narrative for the entire past 6 months that the police conducted and executed what's called a no-knock warrant. That they had executed a no-knock warrant, busted into the house, and started shooting. The attorney, and there were fact checks, such as USA Today came out and fact-checked and said, fact check, it was a no-knock raid. It was a no-knock raid, again and again and again. It was fact check, fact check, fact check. Yet the Attorney General of Kentucky comes out yesterday and says, no, actually, they did knock. The police officer says they knocked. The boyfriend said in the 911 call that he heard a knock, and then there were witnesses who said that they knocked. So the idea that we've decided to allow these institutions that have no legitimacy, but they are increasingly partisan media institutions, to have control as arbiters of truth itself, of the narrative itself, to have power over what we are allowed to say on social media, what we're not allowed to say, through what they call a fact check process. It's completely illegitimate. It's completely broken. It's completely flawed. There's no accountability in this situation. And if we were tracking disinformation logically, and we were tracking it in a nonpartisan way, we would clearly call this out as something that was misinformation, right? Where's Snopes.com on this? That used to actually be somewhat of a good site on this, but now they've become completely partisan. I heard they were I heard that PolitiFact is now trying to fact check Kelly Loeffler's new ad where it's a satirical ad where the guy says, "Oh, I heard she's more conservative than Attila the Hun." And they send an email to the Loeffler campaign saying, "Can you confirm that you are in fact more conservative than Attila the Hun?" I mean, it's a joke. It's a complete joke, and it's a complete delegitimization of our process. It's making a mockery of our democracy. I want a democracy, not a democracy. Maybe a little early for that one. But, folks, we cannot allow this to take over our public discourse.
Yeah.
Is that the humor? I love that. Raheem, why don't you take us out here? Hashtag War and Pandemic live stream. Want to hear from all you folks today on what you're doing to save this republic. Raheem, back to you.
Yeah, Jack Posobiec, your story reminds me a lot of what Christopher Hitchens said about the literal mind being baffled by the ironic mind, and he had plenty of examples for it. I think it was a warning rather than a reflection. And my, how far we've come. This is War Room Pandemic. Jack Posobiec, Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam will return after these short messages.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
But it is important to get them on the record or to make them accountable for not being willing to say that the peaceful transition of power matters irrespective of the words of the president. The second thing you can do, and this is actually even more important than Tom Tillis and Susan Collins, is do this at the state legislative level, because at the end of the day, the play that Bart Gellman in that Atlantic article is describing is getting state legislatures to assign their electoral votes irrespective of the will of the people as expressed in the election to Donald Trump. And so the one thing that really matters there is whether state legislative officers are willing to go along with that. A lot of them are on the ballot. Here's an assignment for every local State House reporter in battleground states. Call them all. Get them on the record about this. Under what circumstances, if any, would they override the will of the electorate in their state?
Will you commit here today for a peaceful transfer of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that.
Some remarkable things that actually can be both shocking and not surprising at the same time, considering that they come from Donald Trump. But Mika, there you had the President of the United States yesterday saying that he would not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. That was the question. So let's again say that for the first time in the history of this republic, you have a President of the United States who will not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. At the same time, he's asking Republicans to lie to their constituents and go back on what they said 4 years ago and promised 4 years ago and ram through a Supreme Court justice. Why? Because he needs that Supreme Court justice to vote for him on any election disputes that he stirs up. That is pretty much a five-alarm fire.
You heard outside the Supreme Court throw him out and the booing of the president and the first lady when they came out there to show their respects, to pay their respects to Associate Justice Ginsburg. this is where we are. Joe Scarborough, I also want to make sure everybody understands he's a bald-faced liar. The reason we need the justice now, Joe, is you guys created this. You created the mass hysteria. Your voters don't want to come out and vote. You got to think of all these new mechanisms of how to get this illegal vote done, right? And of course, the New York Times reports you've got a war room with Eric Holder and former Solicitor Generals and former U.S. attorneys, Perkins Coie law firm. You guys have it, Joe, right? The elites in New York, you guys have it. And that's why we need a justice. You force it. We need a justice now. You can't wait. You need a justice now because you're taking 200 cases of lawfare already in the court system. You're trying to change every state election law, so we just keep counting until you win. It's not a transfer of power. It's continuity of power. Donald J. Trump's going to win big on the 3rd of November. I want to go now to Jack Posobiec. He's actually in Florida. He's going to cover the rally today down in Jacksonville. Then I want to get to Jack, Maxie, and Raheem, the whole crew, to get in here. Florida is ground zero on this, is it not, Mr. Posobiec? This is where it's all going to be decided. Florida and Pennsylvania. How important is Florida? Where do you think the president stands right now, sir?
Well, Steve, that's absolutely right. I mean, Florida and Pennsylvania are sort of your two ultimate swing states, and you could certainly make the argument as to which is going to be the ultimate. Obviously, Florida does have more electoral votes, 29 versus Pennsylvania's 20. However, Pennsylvania was much closer in 2016, and it's projected to be along those same lines this time around. Right now, it's quite interesting in Florida because when you look at Trump's appeal and you look at his support, he actually has increased his percentages with Hispanics here in Florida, but he's also a little softer when it comes to his support amongst senior citizens. So what's interesting is that Florida, he's actually going toe-to-toe, and in some polls is actually up against Biden, but with a different looking coalition than he had in 2016. Not often that you see presidents do that from first to second election. So if he's going to win, it's going to be those collar counties around Jacksonville, Duval County where I'm at, and then out to Pensacola, that panhandle of Florida that's got to come in solid red. That is Matt Gaetz territory. That is where Matt Gaetz is key to come in and bring it home. Remember, election night 2016, everybody was asking about Florida. Everybody thought Florida would look like it was going to go for Hillary, and then the panhandle came in and swung everything back. That being said, you have to look to Broward County. Broward County right there, the suburban county outside of Miami. It is a key swing county, and it's also an area known for rampant, shall we say, chicanery, trickery, some potential ballot problems, obviously, most famously all the way back to 2000. The same with Palm Beach, Miami-Dade. All of this needs to be looked at. And when the president was talking about ballots yesterday, he's clearly talking about the mail-in ballot problems that he's been outlining over the past month, that he doesn't want there to be ballot problems because he knows that it is in close states like Florida, like Pennsylvania, like those Rust Belt states that meant the election for him in 2016, that is where these problems are going to come in. But I've got to tell you, going around the Jacksonville area, just in the time that I've been here, I am seeing Trump signs everywhere. And I don't just mean on the street. I don't just mean in front of the highways, in front of people's houses. You're seeing people that are happy to put them in front of businesses, and the shopping centers have them up. So there's a ton of support for Trump here in sort of this northern Florida area.
Jack, Maxie, Posobiec just talked about northern Florida, the I-4 corridor, Pensacola, places where you got to win big as a Republican. But he also mentioned this rising number of Hispanics. It looks like the voting. I know you've been all over this. Is Miami-Dade or some of these counties going to actually surprise us? Is President Trump's? I know you live down there at least part of the time when we don't have you up in the war room working. What in Florida? Can we expect some surprises from the Latino and Hispanic community in support of President Trump in areas that heretofore have not been particularly supportive of Republicans?
I believe so. And there's a commercial out from the DNC right now that says, choose a caballero, not a caudillo. And caballero is like a gentleman in Spanish vernacular, and caudillo is like a strong man. Now, here's the joke about that commercial, and they're trying to appeal to the idea of Joe Biden's a good man and Donald Trump's a bad guy. When we look back at the history of Latin American caudillos, all of them are supported by the Democratic Party. We're looking at Chavez and the leaders of Venezuela. We're looking at the people in El Salvador, Nicaragua. We look at Fidel Castro and his brother in Cuba. These are the traditional second half of the 20th century caudillos of Latin America, and every single one of them has the support of the Democratic Party historically and to this day. I believe that Latin Americans living in Miami, living in South Florida, are not going to be duped. They are starting to realize what exactly the Democratic Party is, and they've seen the same sort of nascent kind of political movements created in their own country. Somebody pointed out last week, I think it was Sam Faddis, he said there were a lot of people in Havana who thought that Castro was just going to create the same government, only a little bit better. Boy, were they surprised. And that's the same kind of logic that your average low information Democrat in this country is being taught to believe, that it's just going to be a kinder, gentler version of the same America. No, it is not. These Maoist movements have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And right now, we are just at the beginning of the middle here, people. And I think that Latin Americans who have experienced this kind of political terror over time are not going to buy the caudillo versus caballero argument.
Raheem, I know that you spent a lot of time focused on Florida. You're one of the first guys to say, hey, I don't care how they say it. In fact, the campaign or somebody in the campaign a couple of weeks ago briefed the media on background that there was a path to victory without Arizona and Florida. You were like me. It's like, what? I didn't know that. Where do you think we stand? Where do you think the issues are? And how do you think Trump's doing?
Well, look, I think I take a slightly different view from the more the more bullish types out there on this campaign. I do think that there isn't a path to victory without states like Arizona or Florida. I think we have to get very serious about that. I think you're seeing that in the actions that are being taken by the governor and the attorney general there. We had Matt Gaetz on yesterday talking about just how important it is to look into what Bloomberg is doing and getting all the felons to vote. But here's the thing: when you look at the data, as we went through some of it yesterday, I still do think there are areas in which, while Trump is leading on the economy by a big way, and while the economy is by far and away the most important concern of most voters around the entire country, and especially noted in that ABC Washington Post poll about Florida and Arizona, I still do think there are inroads to be had on the other issues. And the one that I think is potentially easiest for the president in this regard, because things like healthcare are not. I think everybody knows that the GOP failed massively to present a counter-argument to the Obamacare argument after spending years and years promising that they'd have something else. They had big fat bupkis on the whole thing. So where can the president make up ground in these states? I think it's on the pandemic, quite frankly. I think the mantra, as I will keep saying it every single day, the CCP virus will go away. The American economy is here to stay. The CCP virus will pass. The American economy will last. And I think if the president keeps going up to the podium and making it very clear that his impetus behind his decisions are to make sure that food is on the table and to make sure that people can pay their bills, then I think he can get through and around and away from all of the criticism that's being leveraged at him for the pandemic handling. Steve, Jack.
Well, here's
we got about a minute. Give us your thoughts on that. What are the themes that Trump's trying to hammer in Florida as you see it right now?
Look, the themes that he's got to hammer down here are economy, our jobs, our recovery, and I definitely think, by the way, I spoke to someone, a retired Army vet that I know pretty well, who lives in the villages, and one thing that he told me is that Joe Biden has been pushing this attack narrative on defunding Social Security. That's been one of his top messages throughout Florida, throughout a lot of areas that have seniors, and for a lot of them, that is taking root. It's getting traction, and the Trump campaign absolutely needs to start responding to that and start responding in a big way. Because when you're talking to people on a fixed income, talking about messing with that or doing anything with that, it goes directly to their bottom line. It goes directly to their lifestyle. It's something that they rely on. The Trump campaign absolutely has to respond to this Social Security attack.
Raheem, why don't you take us out here, brother? By the way, the hashtag War on Pandemic's on fire. I'm going to read some when we come back in the next segment.
Yeah, we all check them out in the break, so make sure you're tweeting at us, #WarAndPandemic in the live chat as well. I want to make sure that everybody is subscribed. It's free, remember, subscribe on all of the podcast platforms. Leave a review, share this out with your friends. Send an email today, send a few text messages. Say, hey, have you listened to War and Pandemic this morning? If not, why not? We'll be back after this short break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, you're going to have a Supreme Court pick on Saturday afternoon. Then you're going to have have the debate on Tuesday. We know a lot of other news is going to be breaking over the weekend. The intensity level is going to heat up as we now burn a path to the 3rd of November, the year of our Lord 2020, when Donald J. Trump's going to have a massive turnout on Election Day. Jack Posobiec, we need the signal, not the noise. There's all kind of chatter and all kind of, fog of war. Tell our audience what you're focused on, what's important, where this is heading.
Steve, we've got to focus on the fact that until our national security forces start taking the threats of the organized network of domestic terrorism and anarchy seriously, that this is going to represent a direct threat not only to those citizens who live in these areas, to people who operate businesses in these areas, but we're now starting to see it come into effect, dovetail, if you will, with the threats to the election. We already know, and I've gone deep on this down the rabbit hole, how they are talking about a siege on the White House targeting Election Day. They are going to target centers that are carrying out vote tallying. They're going to target places where there may be court decisions on specific vote tallying. If it goes to the Supreme Court, you can start to see how all of this is coalescing around a narrative towards essentially delegitimizing the 2020 election. And so American citizens who care about, as you've said, the continuity of government, we must hold fast to those ideals of our constitutional republic, hold fast to those ideals of one man, one vote, secret ballots, right? How is a mail-in ballot a secret ballot? It's not really one. And making sure that we do have accurate, fair elections, because that is the entire purpose of our constitutional republic. If we do not have that, if we start giving in to this mob rule, if we start giving in to these people who have become politicians and not leaders, right? We need to have leaders, not politicians. We need to take these threats seriously. We need to take the threats to our election security seriously and deal with them in a fair and just and expeditious manner.
Real quickly, Jack, they were supposed to show up September 17th, I thought, for the siege in the White House. I don't believe they did. Does this show their hot airs or something strategic that they're doing that we're not quite understanding yet?
Yeah, we've been tracking this on a day-to-day basis, and two things that really threw a wrench in their program was, number one, they realized that the Secret Service and Trump's national DOJ, really under Barr, had their number, knew it was coming, so they started telling people to stand down and just do a protest. But then with the death of RBG, you saw a lot of the energy that would have flowed into that siege actually flow into overnight vigils, candlelight vigils outside the Supreme Court for RBG. That's coming up now with her funeral, with her lying in state. And so a lot of that energy has moved into those areas. But make no mistake, it is absolutely going to come back.
Jack Posobiec, thank you very much. I'm turning to Jack Maxey for a second. By the way, I want to correct myself. They weren't chanting throw him out. They were chanting vote him out. And I will tell you, if you can show up on November 3rd, have a secret ballot, vote him out, hey, fine. It ain't going to happen, though. You're going to get smoked on the 3rd of November. You got to create all these new rules and regulations that keep voting by the pound until you try to defeat President Trump. Jack Maxey, you got some breaking news that you think could be very influential and important for this election, right?
Well, I think this is a big tell for the American audience here. When you look at the swing states of Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, and North Carolina, almost 4 million guns were sold in those states between January and August of this year. In Arizona, that was an 84% increase. Florida, 59% increase. Michigan, 114%, PA, 27%, Wisconsin, 66%, New Hampshire, 79%, and North Carolina, 114%. Now, when we look back at some of these statistics in prior months, we don't have this for this. A great number of these people are first-time gun buyers, and a significant number of them are minority gun buyers and also women first-time gun buyers. I don't think that these people are going to run out and vote for Joe Biden once they've got that AR-15 sitting in the bedroom closet. My opinion, but I think it's a pretty good opinion.
What's the number again, Jack? Just give me that number. 4 million new gun purchases since January this year.
Yes, just in those swing states. It's much, much more when you take the entire country to task. But what I find so amazing is you're seeing a massive increase in these purchases. Now, granted, we've had the pandemic, we've got the Biden riots, so people are probably a little bit more concerned with personal safety. But the fact of the matter is a lot of these people are first-time gun buyers. I doubt that their first maneuver after purchasing a weapon and becoming full constitutional members of our society is going to be to vote for the people who want to come take away that $600 or $700 purchase.
Raheem, give us the signal, not the noise. What are you focused on?
The information war right now, where it's going to go in the next few days or week or so, something like that. There's a very specific reason why they've been hyping this 200,000 COVID death figure, and there's a very specific reason that there's a lot of international pressure bearing down from Europe, bearing down from the United Kingdom and Spain and other countries as it pertains to their virus rates, their R numbers, and their lockdown measures, their increased lockdown measures as a result of this. You'll start to see a lot more coverage of that in the news over the next couple of days, I'm certain. And why? Because the news is committed to tanking the stock market. Now, it's obviously had a couple of bad days, a bad week over already, really led on by the tech stocks. However, they want to keep it going down. They want to keep it low. They want to keep the sort of the more bearish elements in play here. And why? Because that is the biggest thing that the president has in his arsenal right now, is his handling of the economy. It's the one thing that people say that far and away he is the better candidate than Joe Biden on the subject of. And I will say this as well. I think the campaign needs to make sure they're hammering back on that, hammering on China, and hammering on Hunter Biden, Steve.
We got 30 seconds, Jack Posobiec. You know you got to punch out the Vatican and the China deal in 30 seconds. How big a deal is it? What should be done to stop it?
Steve, we used to have a pope that stood against communism. I don't understand why we now have a pope who seems to be getting in bed with it.
Wow.
Jack Posobiec, One American News, live today down in Jacksonville, Florida, covering the event. Will America's Voice be covering it. Obviously, the team at Newsmax going to be great coverage today at President Trump's rally. The key state, Florida, backed up pretty closely by Pennsylvania. That's what it's all going to come down to. So, Jack Posobiec, thank you so much.
All right, we'll be back with more War and Pandemic in just a second.